Poštovani gledalci, dobrodošli u još jedno izdanje emisije Granice Istoka. Ja sam Harun Karčić. Iran i Turska, nasljednici Safavidskog i Osmanskog carstva, stoljećima su ratovali, trgovali, ali i sarađivali. Takva dinamičnost u njihovim međusobnim odnosima oslikava se i danas. Prije samo 4 godine, kada je nametnuta blokada Kataru, Turska i Iran su priskočili u pomoć. Međutim, proteklih mjeseci, zbog suprotstavljenih interesa u Siriji i Iraku, tenzije rastu. Njihovo asimetrično ratovanje, oslanjajući se na posredničke, odnosno proksi snage u regiji, sve češće i dovodi u koliziju. Je li na pomolu novo rivalstvo? Analiziramo u ovom izdanju emisije. Razgovaramo i o tome koliko je američka invazija Iraka i Afganistana doprinijela jačanju iranskog regionalnog utjecaja. Prije razgovora sa našim gostima, pogledajmo uvodni prilog o najnovijim dešavanjima u tom regionu. Iran i Turska dijele granicu dugo 534 km. Kroz historiju su više puta ratovali, trgovali, ali i sarađivali. Uprkos oprećnim vanjsko-političkim stavovima proteklih godina, njihovi odnosi su se poboljšali. Iran je bitan Turskoj zbog svoje populacije od gotovo 83 milijuna stanovnika. To ga čini značajnim tržištem za tursko voće, prehrambene proizvode i građevinski materijal. Iran je i bitna tranzitna ruta turskim kamionima na putu prema tržištima centralne Azije. U vanjskoj politici 3 su glavna razloga koja su zbližila Tursku i Iran. U vezi sa arapskim proljećem, Turska i Iran su imali sličan stav. Obje zemlje su podržale svrgavanje diktatura i pozdravile antivladine revolucije. Ipak, dok je Iran snažno podržao proteste šijskih manjina protiv sunijske monarhije u Saudijskoj Arabiji i Bahreinu, nije podržao proteste u Siriji jer je na vlasti njihov prijateljski režim predvođen Bašarom el-Asadom. Nije podržao ni kasnije antivladine proteste u Iraku jer su na vlasti njihovi saveznici iračke šije. A kad su antivladini protesti izbili na ulicama Teherana, iranska policija ih je momentalno ugušila. Zatim, obje države vide opasnost u jačanju kurdskih marksističkih snaga u pograničnim regijama i protive se američkom naoružavanju istih snaga u susjednoj Siriji. Na kraju, obje države su zajedno podržale Katar uslijed blokade 2017. godine i dijele i imaju isti animozitet prema vanjskoj politici Saudijske Arabije i Ujedinjenih Arapskih Emirata. Ali američke sankcije Iranu 2018. godine znatno su poljuljale ekonomske odnose Turske i Irana. Bilateralna trgovina opada iz godine u godinu. Primjera radi, 2017. godine iznosila je 10,7 milijardi američkih dolara, 2018. godine 9,3, 2019. godine 6,3, a 2020. godine 3,4 milijardi dolara. Zatim, energetika. Od ukupnih godišnjih potreba, Turska je 2018. godine uvozila 7,7 milijardi kubnih metara, odnosno 17% prirodnog plina, kao i 912.000 tona, odnosno 47% sirove nafte iz Irana. Zbog američkih sankcija, izvoz iranske nafte i plina Turskoj je danas opao za 63%. I diplomatski odnosi su pogoršani u posljednje vrijeme. Prvo po pitanju Iraka. Turska godinama njeguje dobre odnose sa iračkim Turkmenima i sunijskim plemenima, dok su se odnosi službene Ankare i šijske vlade u Bagdadu pogoršali. Budući da je iračka vlada veoma bliska Teheranu, loši odnosi Ankare i Bagdada odrazili su se na odnose i Ankare i Teherana. Zatim, geopolitičko polje njihove konkurencije se proširilo. Tokom nedavnog rata između Azerbejdžana i Armenije, Turska je otvoreno podržala i naoružala Azerbejdžan, dok je Iran podržao i naoružavao Armeniju. Iran je protumačio pobjedu Azerbejdžana i Turske kao vlastiti poraz. Kad je riječ o Siriji, trilateralni sastanci u Astani između Rusije, Turske i Irana su se pretvorili u bilateralne sastanke Rusije i Turske, naročito u vezi sa Idlibom, gdje se Iran osjeća marginalizovanim. Uz to, Turska i dalje naoružava sirijske pobunjenike koji se bore protiv Asadovih snaga koje zauzvrat podržava Iran. Na kraju, Turska pokazuje znakove pomirenja sa Saudijskom Arabijom i Izraelom. Budući da Iran te dvije zemlje smatra iskonskim neprijateljima, ne gleda blagonaklono na njihovu normalizaciju odnosa. Idemo sada do Tampa Baya na Floridi, odakle nam se uključuje Arman Mahmoudian, profesor međunarodnih odnosa na Univerzitetu u Južnoj Floridi. Arman, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel. Now let me start by asking you, though Turkey and Iran may appear to cooperate in the more than they compete, especially in the military sphere, Is the confrontation between the two inescapable, especially when Iran has all but won a 40-year-old conflict with Saudi Arabia?
Hello, Arun. I guess that the short answer to your question would be yes. And the reason for that is very simple. Both Iran and Turkey, in terms of the size, in terms of the population, in terms of the material power, and conflict, cultural influence above all, they have the enough capacity to reclaim the role of regional power, or even have an ambition to establish a regional hegemony. So that might be the reason behind the fact that Iran and Turkey have been struggling for centuries. I think it started from the 16th century in a post-Mongol invasion and reinformation of Iran by Safavid Empire. Both countries have wanted to, use the demography of the region. Iran take advantage of the Shia population, and Turkey, obviously, the Sunni population, in order to advance their regional agenda, which led to the generation of the conflicts in the region from the 16th century to now. And the problem is that the Middle East, simply speaking, is not big enough for both of them. So I guess that the conflict would be, and the rivalry would be between Iran and Turkey is inescapable. Both countries are naturally a competitor to each other, and both countries are traditional rivals in the region.
Now, has the Iranian government benefited from the 2002 and 2003 American-led regime change in Iraq and Afghanistan? And has this enabled Iran to further enhance its regional position throughout the Middle East by exploiting the process of the autocratic meltdown following the 2011 Arab Spring?
Obviously, I think that the invasion of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iraq, they were a godsend to the Islamic Republic. We should keep in mind that both Afghanistan under the Taliban regime and Iraq under the Saddam regime before the invasion, before being invaded by the United States, they were actually front line against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Taliban was a radical Sunni government, which in 1998, with invading the Iranian consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif and killing almost 12 Iranian diplomats and journalists, proved that they have no hesitation to take an unorthodox actions to hold back Iran. Saddam Hussein was a Ba'athist, pan-Arabist, anti-Shia, anti-Persian country leader who, started the 8 years of war with Iran, hosted the Iranian armed opposition, including Mujahideen Khalq, or known as the MEK, and didn't show any hesitation of why, aggressively suppressing pro-Iran or Iran-backed Shia movement in 1979, led by Ayatollah Baqir Assad, and also in 1991, the second Intifada or Shia uprising in Iran. So when the United States invaded both of these countries, it was a godsend to the Islamic Republic, because in a way, Islamic Republic or Iran got rid of both of these enemies without shooting one bullet or spending $1. So, and in addition to that, after getting rid of these enemies, thanks to the United States, Iran succeeded to establish a Shia network in both of these countries. These networks or Iranian cultural influence appear to be a great asset or tool to Iran's
foreign policy. That was exactly my next question. How strong is the Shiite network in Iraq and in Syria? And to what extent is Tehran able to influence the political developments in Baghdad and in Damascus?
The data suggests that the influence is notable. We witnessed that after 2005, Iran had an upper hand in negotiation for forming Iraqi government. We have noticed that even when the Syrian civil war began in 2011, Iran freely was able to send in troops, send in military equipment via Iraq's territory or via Iraq's skies territory to Syria. Nobody stopped them. Today, thousands of the Shia militias from both Iraq and Afghanistan, the data suggests that almost 20,000 Afghani Shia under the Fatemian brigade that are activating in Syria. So as a matter of fact, the Shia network in both Afghanistan and Iraq, not just they are advancing Iran's influence over the Iraq and Afghanistan, they also appear to be a tool for Iran to confront the challenges in other parts of the world, the Middle East, including the Syria, as I previously mentioned, that the Iraqi Shia militia and Afghani Shia militia, they are Iran's frontliner, in a fight with the Assad's opposition in Syria.
Now, how did Syria define the Turkish-Iranian rivalry, and why was it so important for Tehran to maintain a secular Ba'athist regime in Damascus?
Syria is a very, very key ally or essential partner to Iran for the multiple reasons. Even though Syria is a secular regime, but we shouldn't forget the fact that the Syrian top leadership is populated by Alawites, they are the division of the Shia. So even though the Alawites are not, close to Iranian Shia or Iranian cleric system as the Hezbollah or Iraqi Shias, but they obviously are considered a cousin to Iran. In addition to that, the historical relation between Iran and Syria is very important. While Iran was struggling with Iraq, Syria was the only Arab country in the Middle East which freely and publicly supported Iran. Even they helped Iran to build the ballistic missiles. They tried to purchase weapons for Iran from the Soviet Union under their name. So when the Hafez Assad's son was in struggle in 2001, 2011, many people said that it's a payback time for Iran. It's a time for Iran to return the favor to the Assad's family. In addition to all of that, Syria has a strategic value in terms of the geographical location for Iran. Iran, since the revolution in 1979, spent billions of dollars, huge amount of time and resources to form and promote Hezbollah as the most important Iran's deterrence tools in the region. In order to maintain the Hezbollah, in order to keep up with this situation, in order to fulfill Hezbollah and provide Hezbollah with a supply line, Iran needs Syria. From the beginning of the formation of the Hezbollah, Iranians tried to export weapons and rockets and other military equipment to the Hezbollah from the Syria to Lebanon. Then also some of the data suggests that Iran has started to build facility and factories and industrial manufacturing in Syria in 2001, 2002 to 2003 to build and manufacture the military equipment there and then support them to the Hezbollah, export them to the Hezbollah. So Syria is a very, very vital part of the Middle East for Iran. When the Arab Spring began, it was obvious for Iran that Iran would go nuclear. Iran would take any actions to protect Syria, because even when the Syrian civil war was happening, many Iranian generals, and especially IRGC generals, said that if the Syria falls, if Assad falls in Syria, we have to confront our enemy in Iran. We have to fight with our enemy in Khuzestan, southeast of Iran, and southwest of Iran, the rest of Iran.
And finally, will the Turkey-Iran struggle continue to define the Middle East in the years to come? And do you see the interest of the United States and Turkey being aligned when it comes to rolling back Iran's successes in the region?
This is a very good question. I'd like to divide it into two parts. As I said, that Iran and Turkey are traditional and natural rivals to one another. But I believe that the rivalry, their competition is a manageable competition. All of the crises that happen between them is manageable. I think they learned from the historical experience, the centuries of war between Ottoman Empire and Safavid Empire, and after that between Afshar Empire and the Ottoman Empire, that the conflicts between Iran and Turkey wouldn't result in any long-lasting or long-term victory for any of them. It would be destructive. It could Vietnamize the region for them, and it disrupts their interest in the region. So they all, in the last decades, they show that every single time that they get into the conflicts, they also have an intention. They also trying to open, the line of communication. For example, when the Iranian and Turkey had a conflict in Syria over the Assad survival, but they obviously cooperated to deter the Iraqi courts from having the referendum. Turkey was openly and increasingly importing Iranian gas and oil. So they have their own mutual interests on other parts. And the second part of the question, actually, the Turkey's relation with Iran is also affected by the Turkey's relation with the United States. Even every time that the United States and the Turkey have a tension, we show a tendency from the Turkish government, specifically speaking President Erdogan, that they try to step forward to Iran. They try to warm up their relation with Iran. So I think that given to the last news that we are getting from the Washington, D.C. and President Biden's attitude toward Turkey, and again, especially President Erdogan, we should actually expect that Iran's and Turkey would reach a level of de-escalation again, especially that now that it is safe to say that the survival of Assad's regime is secure. Assad is controlling a good portion of his Syria. It deterred the threat from the Damascus and Aleppo, and there is not much left for Turkey to impose a threat to Assad's survival, political survival. So I think that the crisis is manageable, and I can anticipate that in a few years, or even starting from a few months, we show a new generation of detente or de-escalation between these two nations.
Right, Mr. Arman Mahmoudian, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure too.
Iranske oružane snage su među najvećim na Bliskom Istoku. Ipak, većinu svojih ratova Iran vodi putem posredničkih paravojnih formacija koje su nominalno samostalne, ali u suštini pod direktnom kontrolom Teherana. Više detalja u nastavku. Idemo sada do Montreala gdje se nalazi Vahid Yucesoy, politolog i stručnjak za tursko-iranske odnose. Vahid, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel. Now, over the past couple of months, a number of Western analysts have been warning about a growing Iranian-Turkish rivalry. Earlier this year, Turkey arrested an alleged Iranian spy ring that had kidnapped Swedish-based Iranian dissident Habib Shab, who was visiting Turkey. What exactly are the root causes of such tensions, and where are the major fault lines?
This is a very good question, and exactly as you said, this is probably the end of the honeymoon in relations between Turkey and Iran, because the relations between both countries had reached their highest level after 2016. And where do the fault lines lie? I mean, Turkey had been condemned by international human rights organizations for turning a blind eye to the abduction and assassination of Iranian dissidents in its own soil. One reason what could be that, Turkey actually decided to give in to the pressure emanating from those human rights organizations. But most importantly, and this is my reading of things as well, that Turkey decided that it was about the time to give into that pressure because, relations started souring in the Caucasus. You know, as you know, Turkey actually openly helped Azerbaijan in the Caucasus, you know, by sending in reinforcements, much to the chagrin of Iran. And that actually infuriated Iran as well, especially when Erdogan, you know, read this poem calling for the reunification of both sides of the Aras River. That drew the ire of the relations. So Turkey might have decided that it's the right time to give into this international pressure, and relations, as we have also observed, have been further souring, especially in places like northern Iraq.
Right, but I mean, over the last 10 years, I mean, Turkey and Iran have been cooperating with regards to the PKK. Both countries see the PKK as a common threat. Then when the Emiratis and Saudis started the blockade of Qatar, both countries sided with Doha. So what exactly are the fault lines of the current Turkish-Iranian rivalry? Is it Syria? Is it Iraq? Or is it the Caucasus?
I think actually, well, I'd say that the fault lines are in all these places. Well, I mean, for the time being, it's sure that Turkey has lost the battle in Syria, in spite of the fact that it still retains a certain presence in the north of Syria. You know, well, Turkey has lost Aleppo, and it seems that the balance of power is increasingly in favor of Iran, and Turkey seems to have lost that battle as well. Whereas when it comes to the Caucasus, it seems to be in favor of Turkey. So those areas are the fault lines where these two major powers of the Middle East have been trying to project their own power, and Turkey does not seem to be actually able to accept that it has lost the Mosul area and Syria.
A number of high-ranking Turkish officials have talked about Mosul as you know, the lost legacy of the Ottoman Empire. There's still a lot of longing for a return to Mosul, a return to Kirkuk, and other parts of northern Iraq. Why is Mosul so important to Ankara?
Mosul has been historically very important to Ankara. You know, the founders of modern Turkey, for instance, when the Ottoman Empire was collapsing in the 1980s, 1920, well, they had come up with this map, as we call in Turkish, Misak-ı Milli, or the National Pact, which had subsumed, you know, the governorate of Mosul into its fold. So Mosul is very important for the Turks for at least two reasons. First of all, it's strategically located. You know, it's close to the actually Turkmen populated areas. And secondly, you know, it's close to oil resources. And as you know, well, Turkey is an oil poor country. So, you know, the loss of Mosul after the Lausanne Treaty could never be digested by many of the rulers of Turkey at the time. And when Erdogan came to power in the early 2000s, several years after arriving in power, he resuscitated that debate through his neo-Ottomanist foreign policy. And well, for him, actually, Mosul was very appealing, chiefly because it was, I guess, a majority Sunni city in a predominantly Shiite Iraq. So he wanted to, I guess, emphasize the Sunni character of Mosul, and those claims are still in place.
Right, but I think the longing for Mosul predates the AKP period. I mean, I came across information that even during the mandate of Adnan Menderes, he in fact was very much interested in annexing Mosul, and so was Turgut Özal during the 1980s.
Absolutely. I mean, well, those claims had been raised fitfully by the presidencies I guess, actually by the prime ministries of these people. But the crux of the matter is they had not been really as forcefully raised as Erdogan has been raising it lately.
Right.
Because, you know, I guess when it comes to Erdogan and his neo-Ottomanist policy, like as I said, you know, the Sunni character of Mosul, I mean, plays a big role. And, you know, he's been talking about both the importance of that city and the fact that the residents of that city have been, I guess, abandoned by the central administration of Iraq for quite some time.
Right. And finally, Vahid, if the US administration is determined to counter Iran, to foil back Iran's advances, can Washington work together with Ankara, at least so far as Iran is concerned?
That's a very good question. In fact, although both countries seem to have similar goals, especially in that part of the Middle East, they have important stumbling blocks that seem to be hampering, you know, meaningful collaboration. You know, well, first of all, I mean, Washington has been very critical of Ankara's human rights violations, which have been quite infuriating the Turkish administration. And secondly, you know, as you might know, I mean, the United States has recently accepted the Armenian genocide, as
Right.
Biden mentioned it in an official paper. You know, so far, many American administrations had been sensitive not to actually raise it. And thirdly, the arms embargo imposed on Turkey by Washington because Turkey is increasingly gravitated towards the Russian, I guess, sphere of influence. Those are the reasons why a meaningful collaboration between both nations seems to be quite difficult. And we should also add, the fact that actually Washington seems to be very sensitive, I guess, not to infuriate Iran for the time being, as both nations have been engaged in nuclear negotiations in Vienna. So although Washington is not quite happy with the proliferation of popular mobilization units in Iraq, it's being very actually adamant to avert any clashes with them because they are pro-Iran militias, and for the time being, what really matters, with as far as Washington's relations with Iran are concerned, is hammering out a deal with Iran.
Right. Vahid Yucesoy, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your invitation.
Turska i Iran zbog svoje teritorijalne bliskosti i geopolitičkih ambicija sve češće pokazuju znakove kolizije. Njihovi odnosi pokazuju da nema stalnih prijatelja ili neprijatelja, već da su jedino državni interesi konstanta koja definiše tok vanjske politike. Poštovani gledalci, bilo je to sve u ovom izdanju emisije Granice Istoka. Ako ste propustili bilo koji dio, emisiju možete pogledati na našoj web stranici balkans.aljazeera.net. Hvala na pažnji.